futures.
This is not a negotiation. This is a national emergency based on a trade deficit that's gotten out of control because of cheating. We're always listening. Don't say you want to lower the tariffs and be done with it. It's the non-tariff cheating. Stop manipulating your currency. Stop dumping stuff in.
And the VAR also downplayed.
You don't have to be a lying loser, believing in the lie to be the liar and not know it. You don't have to be, because the truth is the truth. All believers are liars. Clearly, there's no truth in the word believe. There's only lies.
Capitol Hill want to reassert Congress's power to levy tariffs. Trump is the first president to impose them under this nearly 50-year-old International Emergency Powers Act.
Question any and everything that don't make sense to you.
He's heard from over 50 world leaders
any and everything that don't make sense to you. Because the truth makes sense for true change. It's the make-believe nonsense. That's the game. The make-believe nonsense stops you from using common sense. The common sense that you're born with.
Something that I'm still trying to sort out
Literally,
myself.
we aren't as stupid as we're being taught to be.
We're supporting Trump's policy here, saying this is a big first bet and ask on a negotiation. Then you have Peter Navarro saying, no, it's not a negotiation. You have a sense of which way this is going. It feels like there are two different camps, even within the administration. One exemplified by Elon Musk here, and the other by Peter Navarro.
We saw throughout the campaign that Susie Wiles had everybody on the same page, and communications was very crisp. We didn't see a lot of contradiction or a lot of palisadry. Now we're seeing Elon Musk saying one thing, and on X in a very provocative way, and then Peter Navarro on national television saying the other. So, yeah, I would think that the White House has to get their communications in order because we're hearing two different things. You made the point yesterday. Is this about bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue, or is it a negotiation ploy to bring tariffs down to zero? It can't be both, to your point. I think this week we got to see two things. We have to see movement on the
I'm disappointed in you.
Donald Trump
tell
has
the
the
women
largest tax
suck harder.
decrease in history.
If you in highly weird, suck harder.
From the tariffs.
And also, the Senate, by the way, did
Come on,
advance the
Mr.
ball
Abu.
on Friday night on that exact point.
Exactly, the 5-yard line, I think you would call it now at this point. And then I think on these tariff bills, I think, and we heard during Lucas's report that it may not take weeks.
Miss Erica
but I want to hear the
Dabu.
framework of some agreements with some countries like Vietnam, like Israel, like the United Kingdom, showing the American people this is going the way we want to. If it's still as clear as mud, then the markets will still see that as uncertainty, and then we're going to see thousands of points more drop in the stock market. So I think communications are very key, especially this week, guys.
Yeah, communications, explaining what the goal is, right? What the actual policy is intended to achieve, Katie, and then movement toward that goal. Saying, here's what we've so far accomplished.
Yeah, so going back to Wednesday, when this big announcement was made,
Happy born day to you, but I'm still disappointed in
The
you.
banner chief has been saying about this, despite being
You tell the women to suck harder.
communication from some of his aides. He said it's very simple.
Are you kidding
If you
me?
tariff us,
Suck
we
harder.
will tariff you at the same rate, and we will talk about the rest later. But we want an equal playing field to get back to actual fair trade and free trade, not America footing the bill for these other countries. Essentially, the last 30, 40 years, the attitude has been, well, America's very successful, and therefore they somehow owe the rest of the world some type of tax because they can afford it. This is a president who no longer believes in that. And the president is also using the fact that the United States of America is the largest economy in the world. And he knows that these 50 plus
I
countries
know that.
are calling him and
We
asking for
spent
negotiations. They not just want
$23
access to the
trillion
US market, but it is essential
a
to the
year.
future of their own economies.
God
So he is
damn,
holding
they
the
said we
cards
buy
to the
all the
table
shit.
and asking these countries to come to the table. And I think that there
$23
are
trillion a
negotiations
year.
he's willing
That's
to
what we
have,
spend.
given what he said directly from his own
I
mouth.
see why they
And
fucking
last
tried
week.
to
And I want to
they
get
don't
react
have
to
to
any
be
of
free.
this, but one little nugget that was also buried there.
I wouldn't let us be free,
I think it's really comprehensive. You mentioned on Capitol Hill a growing number of Republicans saying, actually, we support a bill that would give us some say over the tariffs, at least to review. Is the legislative branch maybe reasserting itself a little bit here on this front, possibly?
Yeah, it's interesting because the protesters across America that we saw on Saturday, they had a message was kind of all over the place, the hands off everything, but among that, they still have that Trump is a threat to democracy message that they had out there. And part of that was congressional control, that he's going around Congress with all of these efforts that he's making. It was interesting to see Elon Musk talking the way he was about Europe, because we are expecting Chris Starmer to come out this week and talk about globalization. And that has been big headlines. And there's a coalition of for instance, the New York Times opinion, globalization is collapsing, brace yourselves. The Washington Post, Trump may have just ended globalization as we know it. That may be one of the themes of the week, and the other thing of the week, of course, will be watching the market.
You mentioned some of the protests yesterday.
Yeah.
We talked about it here, and we're going to talk about it again because there's a few updates. Other meltdowns continuing. A second straight weekend of anti-MAGA, anti-Trump protests. But, surprise, some of the demonstrators involved don't really seem to even know what they're so angry about. Watch this.
When you'd rather enjoy the pool than clean someone else's,
Get out the pool.
it matters where you stay. Conrad Hotels and Resorts. Hilton for the stay.
This is more than a treadmill. It's lifestyle. It's a life coach. It's doctor's orders. A difference maker. A pastry. This is more than a machine. This is more than a fitness store. It's your treadmill destination. Johnson Fitness and Wellness. Visit your nearest store and shop top-rated treadmill brands up to 50% off, plus in-store savings and more.
Protest. All of it. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy with. Here, standing for freedom. I don't think they Donald Trump.
Why?
Well, there's a myriad of reasons.
There's just something about Charlie or acting those questions that brings me so much joy. Now there's this. Some TikTokers are out there making wartime-era victory gardens, an interesting throwback. The staple once was used to boost patriotism, now being, let's just say, reimagined for another purpose.
Are you feeling absolutely helpless by the state of America? Start a victory garden. Resist the oligarchy that has taken hold in America.
I think the biggest form of resistance right now towards the government and corporations is starting a victory garden.
Yet another day of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, not so slowly but definitely surely crashing the U.S. economy, start a victory or food garden. I don't know what these next 4 years are going to bring, but I must admit I'm terrified. Start your victory garden. Together we can survive.
Oh, they're so angry, all they can do is garden. You do you. I would point out, inflation is cooling, egg prices are falling, and mortgage rates are down for a second straight week. So those are some of the points that we're hearing from the White House, Katie, along with the jobs report on Friday that we discussed yesterday. There are some bright spots. The administration's going to talk about that. And I guess if you disagree or have a problem with it, you can show up in the streets for vague reasons or plant some flowers.
Or you could just go rage garden, like most of us do. When we're angry with the government, it's like the first Thanksgiving, they're almost going to start because they start their economies. That's really what this is. Look, you're allowed to protest the government. There's a lot of left-wing activists who make a living based on this kind of protest. It's very organized. It's not always spontaneous. And when you have someone like Charlie here going out there and asking, what are you protesting? They can't give you a single explanation about why they're there. It shows you they're just there for the sake of opposing the administration. And God loves America. We have a First Amendment. You're willing to do so. But gardening is not going to get you what you want, although I'm very pro-garden.
And that's the thing, Molly. I mean, we can make fun of it a little bit and poke fun, but I strongly prefer rage gardening to rage firebombing,
Yes.
for example, which is how some people are channeling their problem.
I'm very pro-victory garden. I didn't know about rage gardening. I'm definitely going to try that one, though, for sure. This gardening had a big moment during COVID where people had the same sort of just feelings of uncertainty. So I feel like it's not necessarily a bad thing to get out there and garden. It's very practical. Start now because it actually takes a while for things to grow and to get a hang of it, and it can be expensive to start. But it's very soon.
I get those goosebumps every time.
Do not display electronics like phones.
So I highly recommend it.
It's also, now that I'm thinking through this a little bit, it's like you're taking control of a little plot of land that you actually have supremacy over, and you're like, these other things are too big for me. Let me focus on my own backyard. I actually don't hate that.
I don't hate it, and quite frankly, being a product of the 90s, this sounds like a band that the late, great Chris Cornell could probably be the lead singer for. Rage Garden. Was there Soundgarden at one point? It was called Rage Garden. This is going to be the name of my next fantasy football team. And we've seen this from the left ever since Donald Trump took office, as far as, remember the singing that we saw in front of federal buildings and the holding of hands? It's like we're back in the 60s again. And I'm sorry, this party just looks crazy right now. They look unhinged. And and I want to know who's sending out the memo. Where did everybody get the Victory Garden memo from? Because how does everybody echo that over and over again? We see it in the media so many times, where we saw gangster government from Jamie Raskin over the weekend. I hear a bunch of other Democrats saying the same exact thing.
You should call me from time to time, so we both remember why you like me so much.
It's not resonating because it feels contrived.
Yeah, and liberal policy doesn't necessarily allow you to actually Victory Garden. Let's not forget during COVID, the governor of Michigan roped off the seed section at the store because they didn't want you buying your own seeds. And there's a lot of places in cities in particular where there's lots of coding. It doesn't allow you to actually garden or have chickens the way that you want. But the good news is inflation is down, and you can go buy your eggs at the store for a half of what they were just a month ago.
Chris Dunbar has eggs. She has chickens, and she gets her own eggs.
Yeah.
That is a very good callback on Michigan.
Just hope we don't have to go buy no seeds for you, Rage Gardeners.
Over you, big Gretch. We remember. All right, coming up on this jam-packed 2-hour edition of the Big Weekend Show, the Trump administration stepping up this power struggle with Democrat-appointed judges. Plus, the great one has been dethroned. Not Mark Levin, another great one. We'll show you the power play goal, there it is, that made history earlier today very exciting. But first, could the cringiest Democrat in America be running for president in 2020? I didn't give it back.
I plan on waking up on November 6th with Madam President, and then I
just want to be clear, you won't be waking up together.
Well, goopy 80s sitcom dad Tim Walz had his fair share of cringy moments during the 2024 campaign trail, as you just saw, but it doesn't look like we're going to get an encore performance. Why? Listen.
I'm certainly thinking about running again in Minnesota if that's what they want. I am not thinking about running in 2028. And my advice to folks is if in this moment you're planning for 2028, you're going to get rolled by the people in the streets.
So Walz is out. So who's going to step up? Could it be Cory Booker? Senator Spartacus spent 25 hours filibustering about, well, nothing this week.
With the senator, hot New Jersey, yield for a question. Let me think about this for a second. You can take your time thinking about it, sir. I want to go a little bit past this, and then I'm gonna deal with some of the biological urgencies I'm feeling.
With the senator yields for a question.
So Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
Yeah, that's my senator. But Booker seems a little hesitant to throw his hat into the ring to be the party's leader.
The Democratic Party needs a national leader. Are you there?
I think that, as the real Baker said, we are the leaders of the people. I think the Democratic Party needs everybody to realize it's time to hold us to lead.
Okay, so younger Democrats are looking for new leaders, and Booker fits the bill, as the party is struggling to connect with a new generation. But old-school Democrats like James Carville are still focused on anti-Trump hate.
Do you know these collaborators with the country?
Man, your old ass ought to go sit the fuck down somewhere. Fire marching looking bill ass looking
Maybe you
ass.
need to go in history and
Shit.
see what happened in August of 1944 after Paris was liberated. They didn't take very kindly to the collaborators. No. It was not a very pretty sight in the streets of Paris. I'm not saying that these people should be placed in pajamas and have their heads shaved, march down Pennsylvania Avenue, and spit up. We'll be accepting nominations. We're not in a hurry, but we want to get our appeasement collaborator Hall of Fame up and running at some point.
I told you Fire March Bill need to shut the fuck up and go somewhere and sit the fuck down some fucking well. I don't know why the fuck they even got him saying much of shit. His old ass probably don't much remember where he coming to go on his own damn self. And they got him saying shit.
The old Nazi playbook. I thought Carville guy was kind of above this. He tried to do the common sense thing during the 2024 campaign that Democrats should stay away from the woke stuff and the hyperbole. Now he's just part of that. He was relevant 33 years ago when he helped Bill Clinton win 43% of the vote to win the 1992 election. But when you hear talk like that, it's just not going to resonate. The whole fascist Nazi thing just ain't working with Donald Trump. But yet here's James Carville talking like that.
The collaborators, he's talking about people within France who are collaborating with the Nazis, a foreign invading and occupying power, right? As opposed to the Trump administration, not regime, that won a free and fair election in a way that was more dramatic than a previous Trump victory. So it fails historically. I do think it is a really actually disgusting thing to even draw that comparison, but he chose to do so. I just want to quibble about one thing, because we said it sounds like
what's up?
Going back to the beginning of the
Sure
intro
thing.
here.
Limo en route.
2028. I didn't necessarily hear that. He said, I'm not thinking about running for 2028, which is a wiggle word that politicians use. I think he absolutely is. He's had a rough couple weeks, so maybe he's taking it back from this publicity tour and saying, I'm not currently, is what I heard, thinking about this, but I think the ambition is there. He's told reporters the ambition is there. It's clearly there for Cory Booker. There are a lot of people waiting to run in 2028. They just don't want to.
Don't forget to bring me some cars from the car.
Would that be the perfect gift for the Republican Party of Tim Walz for the 2028 nominee? I mean, this is the guy who said he was in Tiananmen Square during the 1989 massacre when he was actually in a cornfield in Nebraska. This is the guy who actually said that he held weapons of war when he actually never went to war in Iraq and left his own unit. This is the guy, and this really insulted me as a football fan, said he could run pick sixes on defense when it's not a play, it's something that's trained. Overall, he was probably the worst vice presidential nominee of our lifetimes, yet he's still entertaining, to Guy's point, being the next president of the United States.
Well, the recent history for Tim Walz is usually you pick a vice presidential candidate who can add to your ticket, and he did not do that for Kamala Harris. They picked him thinking that he would be able to satisfy the far left of the Democratic Party to end up, holding their nose and voting for Kamala Harris. But when it comes to the future of the party, Democrats have to figure out what they're actually for. What are they running on? You keep hearing about being rolled in the streets, causing, damage, all these protests we're seeing. But regular Americans who do go to the polls want to know, okay, what are Democrats for? And when it comes to basic policy positions, Democrats can't even come out like Gavin Newsom, for example, who is also a 2028 candidate, and say basic things that 80% of the country agrees with, like boys should not be in girls' locker rooms or competing and stealing against them in their sports and stealing their scholarships and making them uncomfortable in their locker room. So they've got a lot of policy positions to figure out, and they haven't quite gotten it yet, and they're still being held hostage by the far left of their party.
And to your point, Katie, in Minnesota, in Tim Walz's own congressional district, Joe Biden won by 7 points in that district in 2020. That went down to 3 points in 2024. So Tim Walz, to your point, actually retracted in his own state, Molly, which is incredible. Getting back to Cory Booker for a sec, it seems like our media really is into performance art, right? In other words, Cory Booker actually didn't filibuster any specific bill, didn't accomplish anything. He just spoke for a really long time, and golf clapped to him as far as being able to do that, I suppose. But now, all I know is when I went to those protests yesterday in Bryant Park covering it, most people, their three top picks for presidential candidate on the Democratic side, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Cory Booker, who, again, we forget, he ran for president in 2020 and didn't even get to Iowa.
Yeah. The challenge within the Democratic Party continues. There's still the far left versus the moderates. The moderates haven't been able to really find the flashiness yet to compete with the far left. It seems like people are a little more invested in AOC and the baton being handed off. The Democratic Party was dominated for a long time by the Clintons and the Clinton machine and all of the loyalists. And then there was the Obamas that came in, not with quite the long-time control that the Clintons seemed to have, or seem to have. And now it looks like there's this contingent on social media and across the younger Democrats that are looking for just new faces. And that's going to be tough for the Democrats because on the Republican side, there's this young cabinet. You can already see this long list lined up, ready for 2028. So then you have to hunt around and say, who are the Democrats? You know, there's a young governor in Maryland, 46 years old, Wes Moore. You have Jared Polis out in Colorado, who's been going back and forth with the Trump administration. There's Maura Healey in Massachusetts. She doesn't get a lot of play nationally, but she did do this big kind of rollout with the New York Times recently.
Yeah.
So the list, a little more obscure, but they need to get started on it.
Indeed. And it seems that if you want to be a presidential candidate these days, it's not just about policy. You have to be, to a certain extent, an entertainer and somebody that can bring people in. It's just the new way we are. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump. Anyway, still ahead, the woman who punched a pro-life activist in New York City is now speaking out and shifting blame. Plus, could residents in Maryland be forced to pay reparations? But first, replacing the ABCs with DEI.
Programs or lose federal funding. But New York doesn't seem to care. They're rejecting the White House's demands and joining a growing list of cities and states across the country to continue to push back against White House efforts to root out woke ideology. CB Cotton is live in New York City with the latest. CB.
Hey, Katie, yeah, the White House is arguing that DEI policies are a violation of Title VI of federal civil rights law. But as you mentioned, New York State appears to be the first to flat out reject the Trump administration's take on it. In a letter sent on Friday, New York education officials dispute how the law is being interpreted by the White House and arguing that there's no authority that states have to agree with that interpretation. The letter reads in part, quote, "We understand that the current administration seeks to censor anything it deems diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there are no federal or state laws prohibiting the principles of DEI. We've reached out to the U.S. Department of Education for its response to this defiant letter, which comes after the Trump administration notified states this week that they'd have 10 days to certify that their public schools have eliminated DEI initiatives. When making the announcement, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Craig Trainer had this warning. Federal financial assistance is a privilege, not a right. When state education commissioners accept federal funds, they agree to abide by federal anti-discrimination requirements. So the White House is citing a 2023 Supreme Court decision banning race-based affirmative action in college admissions to argue that any public school DEI program is indeed a violation of Title VI of federal civil rights law. Katie.
All right, thank you so much for that report. We appreciate it. Okay, guys, so the administration argues that these DEI programs are, in fact, a violation of the Civil Rights Division and the Civil Rights Act. We have a number of attorneys inside DOJ working on that. They say, quote, "The use of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs..."
Man, we're a bunch of fucking assholes allowing them to make up some more shit where they can then use the legal system to have these legal line fucking lawyers represent some bullshit. Boy, we stupid. God damn, we stupid.
Legal fights about whether the Supreme Court decision on college admissions applies, for example, to elementary school education in public schools in New York City. I'll be watching that with interest. But just broadly speaking to the American people, I think the case is pretty straightforward. Our test scores, our results in our nation's public schools are down. They are pitiful. They should be a lot better than they are. And focusing on getting those scores on reading and math and writing and that sort of thing up at the expense of ideology on identity and that sort of thing, whether it's sexual or gender or equity or what have you, that should be the overwhelming priority. And I guarantee you that is an overwhelming viewpoint among the American people.
So, Molly, there's been some credibility here the administration has built up. They have warned college campuses, universities like Columbia, for example, that if you don't stop violating the Civil Rights Act, they're going to pull millions of dollars in federal funding. So now they're taking this to the New York state government.
Absolutely, and there's a contingent, particularly on the Democratic side, that argues that this is an effort to bully. But some of the colleges have talked about all of the efforts that they are putting in, acknowledging the anti-Semitism on their campus. They're saying, look, we agree that this has occurred, and we are doing this, that, the other thing to try and rein this in and try and stop this. So I think there is some acknowledgement of just how horrific things were, particularly over the last year on college campuses, and that they recognize that this occurred, and that they are willing to do some work to get some of this funding back. They may have acknowledged in some cases that there was not enough done to protect Jewish students.
Yeah, and it's discriminatory, and that's exactly why they're going after it. But speaking of discrimination, while Trump is trying to get rid of DEI, Maryland's Governor Wes Moore is staying silent as a new bill to create a potential reparations commission sits on his desk. Moore is the only black governor in America, so it'll be interesting to see what stance he takes. But Maryland isn't the only state with this type of potential legislation. But nowhere is pushing reparations harder than in California.
If you are running for office, do not think you are going to win your election if you don't have a concrete plan for reparations.
Reparations is now. Pay the debt, cut the check.
So we need to pay now.
No, and I ain't gonna lie. No, I ain't gonna lie. We just paid the migrants.
Reparations are not a luxury for our people, but a human
We
right
just paid the migrants.
for millions of Americans. It's time for us to be the ones from all of the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors.
But despite this pushback against Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a reparations bill late last year. So Joe, this
When you can't explain who you are 100% to the point where you can tell somebody and explain to somebody what the percentage means in order for you to be 100, you don't know
And the
your
answer is we
natural
have no
order to
idea
live in
at
and
this
live by.
point. The state of Maryland has huge budget deficits at this point, and Gavin Newsom entertained the prospect of reparations until he
Literally.
realized that, oh, I have no way to pay for this. So Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, is going to
Literally, the truth
appease
is
the
need to
far
know.
left of the party and say, okay, we're
And the truth is
considering
the
it,
truth.
but then when push comes to
Literally.
shove, and you
You
actually
are.
have to figure out a way to
It
pay for
always
these
will
things,
be.
it's just not going to happen.
All
You
there
see polls
is.
where something like 30%
The
of
truth.
Americans support
It is what
reparations.
it
So
is.
again, if you're the Democrats,
All
you
it
want to be
is.
on the 30 side of a
The
70-30
creator
issue,
within the
roll the dice
creation.
and take your chances.
You're never
because
alone.
This is not going to fly.
Brown men and women,
Guy, what is
women
your
and men,
perspective on this?
Well,
born a
reparations, I
winner,
think, is an
100%.
abomination idea. It's unbelievably
My
unfair.
question
It's
is,
toxic.
how in the
politically.
fuck did we
And
allow
even just
someone to
thinking about
teach us
how
out of our
right, like
natural
some newly
order?
arrived Asian immigrant family from the last couple of decades, they're going to show up and they're going to have the government reaching into their pocketbook to take money out and hand it to people who themselves were never enslaved, and in some cases their ancestors weren't. I mean, this would be a giant tangled mess that would end very badly for anyone who tried to implement it, which is why we're seeing
How
this
did we
come up.
allow
The
them to trick
commission
us with just
is right.
5 fucked
They
up
have to
words?
pander to some of the people in their base who want it, but they realize they can't actually
Make
do this.
believe,
So they'll sign a
understand,
law saying,
fake,
yes,
hope.
we're going to study this, and I think that's where it dies.
The perfect government solution.
Literally.
It's a commission.
Just
a
5
commission
fucked
to
up
develop
words.
a
Fuck you up, fuck me up to the point where we didn't know the truth no
Senator
more.
Booker, he and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, they just in February.
That's all I can say.
In Black History Month, put
How
in
long
a historic reparations
are we
bill
gonna be
to
stuck
do just that,
this
the
way?
legislation to establish a federal commission to examine the lasting legacy of slavery and develop reparations proposals. And it goes on. And I feel like that must be so frustrating for people that genuinely believe
Because the
that
truth is the
reparations
truth.
is something that should be
I
done,
can't
because that
make
is
you know
often
what you
they
need to
get
know
when they
that's
get
already
another
waiting on
study.
you to realize for
And
yourself.
broadly speaking, Americans view the prospect of reparations.
I can't even get to the
positively.
lowest
Largely,
fucking
it's-
level
the Pew Research
and say that I'm
survey was
reminding you how to
68%,
fucking
about
think.
7 in
I'm
10
not gonna say I'm
citizens should
reminding
not
you of
be
no
repaid.
shit.
However,
But
there's
that's what
very
I'm doing.
fine divide, regarding
Shit.
race on that issue.
This is some
As a
stupid
parent,
shit
this is my fifth
when I gotta
grade
remind you how to fucking think.
I said, all right, well, your mother and I have an example.
Brown men and
And what they
women,
did,
women
you
and
know,
men.
It's the pun. As
I'm so disappointed in us.
Deal with it. All right, coming up. Fox News Alert. At least 16 people are dead.
Experience Lab redefines. Immerse yourself in unparalleled craftsmanship and innovative technology.
Shit.
cannot believe that people are tired of so many niggas in poverty. Now, hey there,